My father called last week to wish me happy birthday. It's the first time he's done it in years. I didn't talk to him. Uh, Jessica, my wife, she's the one who she thought it might be good to talk to. So she's the one who talked to him, which was difficult because she didn't know I still had a dad. I told her that he had died, which was fine, except one day this guy calls up out of the blue and he says, "Can I speak to Isaac, please?" And she says, "He's not in at the moment. Can you leave a message?" And he says, "You tell him this his father called." And she says, "Okay, who's this?" And he says, "This is Isaac's father. Who's this?" And she says, "I'm his wife." And he says, he laughs kinda. And he says, "He didn't tell me he got married." I mean, most people would be like, "Oh, screw you. This is bullshit. This is." Sorry, I'm sorry. I don't normally swear. I'm not. Most people would say it's just bull crap, but you got to understand. My father can be very persuasive. He's got this voice. It's like low, rumbly kind of burr. It's very solid and trustworthy. I didn't inherit it. I kind of sound like a Jewish dentist. I mean, it's not really a voice that inspires devotion in others. So, but before long, before Jessica started talking, he started talking and she started listening. And by the sound of it, it sounded like they had quite the chat. They went on about how long we've been married, why we don't have. And it seemed like the two of them were getting on like a house on fire. And I'm hearing this all secondhand, from my wife who's laying into me. I mean, she won't quit asking me why. Like, why won't you talk to him? And she won't quit. She won't quit going at it, even though it's my birthday. I might add, I'm still the birthday. But anyway, I say, "Oh, fine, okay, fine. I'll tell you why we don't speak anymore." My mother died when I was very young. And that just left me and my father. And he raised me all by himself. I don't really remember my mom, but my father, I mean, Jesus, he was a rock. He has stone gray hair. He smelt of Old Spice. He was admired. He was respected. I mean, he was a pastor. He was very serious. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, he loved me, but, it wasn't like he was one of those touchy-feely kind of dads. Like we weren't going to be holding hands, walking the sidewalk or anything like that or horsing around, but I knew he loved me because, I could make him smile. Like when I was a kid, he'd be in his study working on a sermon and I'd come in to show him some magic trick or some painting or drawing that I was working on. You know how kids are. And, he wouldn't just look at me and be like, "That's great, honey. Yay, woohoo, yo, woohoo." No. No, he would stop what he's doing. He would look at you. And that serious face would thaw into this smile that cocked to one side of the mouth. And the little crow's feet would wrinkle around the eyes from the smiling and the wrinkling. And he smiled like that, like really smiled, like, yeah, I knew he loved me. And there were two things in this world he loved more than anything else: me and God. One day, God started speaking to him. No. I know I said he was a pastor. I mean, it kind of comes with the territory, but this wasn't one of those like, he's always there when you need him. No. No, it was more like Abraham, this is God. Listen up. No, we were in the kitchen and he just dropped his coffee cup over breakfast, smashed it. And I mean, I look at him and he's staring off into space. And it's like, he's looking at something I can't see. And I say, "Daddy." And he turns to me, "Yes, son?" And I'm like, "What you doing?" And he says, "He just spoke to me." And I say, "Who?" And he says, "God." Now, I hardly saw him after that. I mean, sure, yeah, he was still around the house, still carried on working, taking care of me and everything. But I mean, he'd be gone for hours on end. I wouldn't even know where. I know there was this one time outside in the backyard at night, and I saw him out there. I was in my pajamas waiting for him to tuck me in. And I walk outside and I see him, he's looking up at the sky. And it's this big sky full of stars. I mean, it was huge. And I stand next to him and I slide my hand in his. And he's smiling and I'm thinking, this is pretty cool. You know, I'm out late like an actual grown-up, you know. And I realize he has no idea I'm there. I mean, he was miles away. And I say, Daddy, Dad. And he looks at me, he's like, and I said, what you doing? And he gets quiet for a moment and he looks at me and he says, just listening to him. And then he went back up to the sky and he started smiling. I don't know, 2 weeks later, I wake up in the middle of the night and he's sitting on the edge of my bed. And he's got his hands resting in his lap and, you know, his big dark eyes are resting under his brows and he's looking at me and I can see through the curtains that it's still dark out. And I'm like, Daddy, what's that? And he says, it's okay, son. We need to get up, get dressed, and I'll tell you more on the way. And he walks me to the bathroom and I see that he's run a fresh bath for me. And he waits outside while I pee, and then he comes in and he picks me up and he puts me in the tub and he begins scrubbing at me real thorough-like, making sure there's not a speck of dirt left. And then he picks me up out of the tub and he wraps me up in this big pink towel and he starts drying me off. And he runs this brush through my hair, you know, trying to get out all the knots. And then he walks me back to the bedroom and I see that he's laid my clothes out for me. And it's my Sunday's best. And he starts dressing me real meticulous-like he's really focused on getting all the buttons and the laces and the creases out. And I'm thinking this is kind of strange because this is the most attentive he's been with me for some time. And he stands back and he just nods to himself. He smiles to himself like he's happy with how I look. But when I look at his face, I notice he's not actually smiling. He takes me downstairs and I see there's this big sports bag on the kitchen table. And he picks it up and he opens the door and he says, come on. And I walk out and he grabs my hand and he puts it in his and it feels so small. It's like a tiny fish. And he leads me out the back door and up over the hill, through the tall grass to the top. You know, we're walking hand in hand, but we're walking in silence. And I mean, it's not a hard walk, but you know, I'm having to walk four steps for every one of his, you know, giant, and, you know, and I'm getting hot and I'm getting sweaty and a little bit breathless, but I don't want to say nothing because, you know, he looks so focused and determined and, you know, I don't want to, I mean, you know, I don't want to. And we get to the top of this clearing and we can see the whole town under the stars, you know, and it looked really beautiful. I remember, you know, teenagers used to come out there and smoke and drink, you know, but it was empty that night. And I just remember it looked like really like Norman Rockwell, you know, like people always rose tint the past, but that night it really looked. And we get to the top of this clearing over these rocks and we see one of them is fallen down and it's made to look kind of like a table, you know, like an altar. And he picks me up with his big hands and he plops me down on the rock and my little feet are hanging off the edge. And he crouches down beside me and he looks me dead in the eyes and he says, Isaac, you know Daddy loves you, don't you? You know he loves you very much. And I know it's kind of serious, so I say, Yeah, I know, Daddy. And for the first time that night, he smiles at me. And then he says, it's very important I do exactly what he tells me to do. And I say, okay, and I sit there nice and still like he asks, as he reaches in the bag and he pulls out a length of brown rope and he binds my wrists and ankles and he lays me down on the rock, cradling my head so I don't hit it when I lie down. And it's cold on that rock. I mean, the ropes are really tight and I need to pee, but I don't want to say nothing because I don't want to upset him. And he looks at me with those big eyes as empty and black as the sky, and he says, it's okay, son, you're being very brave. I need you to do one more thing. I need you to close your eyes real tight and look away. And I don't want him to see me cry, so I nod, and he says, good. And he leans down and he kisses me on the forehead. I can still feel his stubble, the smell of his Old Spice. I turn my head and I look away. And I don't know what he's doing, but I don't want to look because he told me not to, but the ropes are really tight and I really need to pee and I'm scared. And so I open my eye, just one crack, just a little bit to see what he's doing. And as I see my father, he's reaching into the bag and he's pulling out a knife. It's a long silver hunting knife with a green handle. It's very sharp and clean. And he turns around and he looks right at me. And he moves really quickly. He covers my eyes and he pushes me up against the rock and it hurts. And I can't. I can feel his sweat, the smell of his Old Spice. And I can feel this sharp point against my, the knife is pressing, is shaking, it's against my neck and he's breathing and I can feel that he's getting himself ready to push it in. And then it stops. Everything stops. There's no sounds, it's just a ringing in my ears. And I can still feel the knife pressed up against my neck, but it stopped shaking. And I look through my fingers and I see my father. He's looking up. He's listening again. But there's like no one there. No one's talking to him. And I say, Daddy, and he blinks and swallows and comes to like he's waking up and he looks down at me. And for the brief moment, he looks like he has no idea who the hell I am. And then he finally sees me and the knife at my neck. And he very carefully takes the knife from my throat and he undoes the laces and ropes and he's shaking and sweaty. And he gets me back up sitting again. He looks at me very intensely, like this is the first time he's ever seen me. And then I smell something strong and we both look down and there's this wet patch where I wet myself. And he suddenly becomes very embarrassed and he looks away. And there's a cold wind that blows and my penis shrivels up and I slide down the rock and he stands with me there for a moment. And then he picks up the bag and we start to make our way back down the hill towards the house. Me walking behind him this time, but we're not holding hands. By the time we get back to the kitchen, the sun's come up and he undoes my laces and helps me out of my soiled clothes, and I let him. And he leaves me there standing in the middle of the kitchen, half naked. My little penis is dangling from under the hem of my shirt as he comes back in with a change of underpants and a blanket. And he helps me into the underpants, one leg at a time, and he wraps the blanket around my shoulders. And he leads me to the table and sits me down at the head of it. And I watch him in silence as he moves around the kitchen, opening cupboards and drawers. And then he places a bowl in front of me with a spoon. And he fills it with cereal. It's Captain Crunch. And he pours cold milk over it. And he sits down next to me. And we sit there in silence for a moment. Just the sound of milk crackling in the cereal. And I look at my father, and he looks at me. And I pick up the spoon and I dip it in the bowl and I begin to eat the cereal. And we just carry on. My father and I, we don't really talk. We never talk about it. We shared a table, we ate together, but we didn't really speak. Not really. Conversations sort of dwindled and dwindled and dwindled until one day they just stopped. And I went to college when I was 17, went up north as far as I could for any place that could resemble, a semblance of civilization. And that was the last time I saw my father. That was the last time we spoke. I said all this to her, Jessica, my wife. And she got real quiet for a moment. And she said, but why would he? You're his son. He loved you. Yes, he did. I guess he just loved God more.
I can't sleep a wink, my dearest. I can't sleep at night, 'cause the man I love, my darling, he don't treat me right. I can't stomach food, my honey. I can't eat a bite, 'cause the man I love, my darling, he don't treat me right.
Can't see colors anymore. I try, but it's no use. Purples, greens, and reds are gone. All that's left is black and blue. I can't stand the daytime, precious. I can't stand the light. 'Cause the man I love, my darling, he don't treat me right. 'Cause the man I love, my darling, he don't treat me right.